All right, I believe we're live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Haliburton Highlands Ontario Provincial Police Detachment Board meeting. We are just waiting on a few more members to join virtually due to the weather we're currently experiencing. We have a number of board members joining remotely. We do not currently have quorum yet, but we will proceed for anybody that's other than our board members that are joining us, any community members that are watching online. We will commence with a call to order and our land acknowledgement before we get in any voting items. So we'll call the meeting to order at 1:05 p.m. and we'll ask Sue to read our land acknowledgement.
We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial.
Thanks very much, Sue. And we will pause while we wait for other members to join, just to ensure there's no disclosure of any pecuniary interest from any of the board members. We'll have Alicia check in with our members that are trying to join remotely.
Who do we have that's present at right now?
There's you, Liz, myself, Andrew, and that's it as far as board members, and we got Sue and Deb with us, and Alicia.
Andrew Hudson.
Yes.
So we therefore have quorum. We have
Is it-
4 of 7.
Well, that's what I thought, and Sue seemed to think it was 4 plus 1, but if we've got 4, then I think 4 out of 7 should give us quorum, should it not?
Every other committee or township, that's how it works. So
Okay, well, I'm confident with that then. We got 4, and we'll wait for the others 2 to join, and allow us to at least move forward and get on with the agenda. So we will then move on with the meeting and wait for the others to join, but and I'll seek when they do join if they have any pecuniary interest at that time. But do I see any disclosure of pecuniary interest? The members that have joined so far, seeing none. You have your agenda in front of you that was sent out last week. I'll look for a motion to accept the agenda. Member Hodgson, Member Carter. And I don't know if Alicia or Sue are reading the motions. Maybe Sue can do this one while Alicia keeps trying to get people on.
Moved by Member Hodgson, seconded by Member Carter. Be it resolved that the agenda for the January 21st, 2026 meeting of the Haliburton Highlands Ontario Provincial Police Detachment Board be approved.
All in favor? So approved. Thank you. Next up, the adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting held November 26th. I have a motion to accept our minutes from the November 26th meeting. So Member Carter, seconded by Member Danielson.
Be it resolved, moved by Member Carter, seconded by Member Danielson. Be it resolved that the minutes from the November 26, 2025 meeting of the Haliburton Highlands OPP Detachment Board be hereby approved.
Thank you. And just for discussion prior to seeking approval, there was a mention under the detachment commander's presentation. I think it was you, Member Carter, asked about the impaired statistics and whether we could give a breakdown of impaired by alcohol versus impaired by drug. I did present that to our detachment commander, and Deb followed up with it. I don't know if you want to speak to it now, Deb, or I can. So Deb spoke with the records management team from the OPP, and what we were able to identify for 2025, 1/4 of all the charges here in this jurisdiction were by drug alone or drug and alcohol combination. The other 3/4 were, or 75%, were strictly alcohol impairment. So hopefully that adds some clarity for you, Member Carter. I don't know if it elicits any further questions or.
just a comment that I think that's something that should be tracked over time, because not really certain what we would do with it, but it may be of interest and may show that there's some changing social demographics going on.
Yeah, no, and I think it is something, you'll see later when we're talking about the local action plan and some of the focus on DRE officers, the drug recognition experts, and getting more of them trained up so they can do the drug field sobriety testing in the field and not have to take the member somewhere else. That does have an impact on our detachment staffing as well. So it is something that I agree it needs to be tracked going forward. And I think Deb's alive to that now.
Yeah, and just to go further, we've actually met with our hospital here as well just recently about the drug stuff, and they're coming up with a protocol as well for blood demands and stuff like that for the drug recognition stuff.
Good.
Alrighty. Any other comments, questions about the minutes? If not, I'll seek your approval for the minutes to be approved for the adoption of the previous meeting on November 26, 2025. All in favor? So approved. Item 6, delegations and presentations. We have none today. Again, if there are specific presentations the board members like to hear, please let us know and we'll endeavor to get those in front of us at future meetings. 7.1 is Detachment Commander Final 2025 Evaluation. Wait, just bear with me while I pull up the form. I think it was at our last meeting, I spoke to the fact that we had received from the OPP the template and the process to undertake to do the evaluation of Deb. There wasn't a lot we could provide at that time because Deb was fairly new to us. However, the OPP did follow up with Deb closer to the end of December or middle of December and said that the template allows for a year-end final approval and final performance evaluation before we start our next goal setting for 2026. So I met with Deb back the early part of December and just went through a couple of items, and you will see, I think it was attached as part of our agenda, the comments that were provided, and just seeking if there's any additional comments from the members of the board. Obviously, there's one section on detachment commander duties. The next one speaks to legislative requirements, and basically tick the boxes on most of those ones for work within the legislation. And then detachment action plan commitments. You'll see that obviously we refer to the fact that we're working on our local action plan, but still early to measure that. But there are a number of supporting activities there. And then the final piece is the additional feedback. And you'll see my comments about being prompt and timely with her communication, and then Deb's comments below. So any other comments from the members of the board with respect to the year-end appraisal? Member Carter?
Yeah, the prompt and it's mentioned a couple of other times. I think it's not only in response to the board, but also to the I guess really the main players in this area are the 4 mayors. So I know that when I or my staff have reached out, we have had a good response, both in timing and in taking our issue seriously. So I think it's more than just the board; it's really to the whole county.
Oh, appreciate that, and I think Deb's alive to the fact that particularly when we start talking about those communication protocols and how we get information out on major events and how we engage with other members of the community. So it is something we've talked about, not just with the board, but with the community itself. And I think Deb's alive to that. We tried maybe a little unsuccessfully back in the fall to have a community engagement session, but we'll try some more in 2026. Any other comments? Member Hodgson.
Just general comment. Look where you go. The plan looked very good. I think from the board perspective, never be shy to include the word enforcement. We have prevention and different things. Enforcement's key.
Yeah.
Enforcement on drugs. I know and appreciate we're going after the lead of it, whether they be in the GTA, but small community can send quite a message just charging like you did in Minden last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever. I think that's never to be looked sideways on. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for the feedback. And I've just been advised that Member Burton is joined us by phone, and Member Shevadukis is online with us as well. So we have.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. If you can just shout in, we can't see you on the screen. So if you can just, if you have a question, just say, you have a question and we'll try and acknowledge you. Member
Thank
Hodgson.
you.
So, sorry, just follow up. This is the action plan one. It's good. That's a good document. It's a full document that gives you more than enough to do.
Yeah.
And I think it affects, certainly we appreciate as a community, it covers all of our uniqueness and the diversity of the distances, but thank you for the work on it. We can add more for the board as we get to work through it more as well, but that was good.
Awesome. Thank you. So any other feedback, any comments on the 2025 final evaluation? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve that final evaluation.
I'll move.
Member Shevadukis, second by Member Danielson. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, ask for approval. All in favor?
Yay.
In favor.
Thank you. That item is approved. I need a motion, I believe. Super.
Moved by Member Shevadukis, seconded by Member Danielson, that the Detachment Commander final 2025 evaluation be approved.
Thank you. And it has been so approved. Next up is our item 7.2, our 2026 local action plan goals and objectives. And again, if you just bear with me while I pull it up here. So the board will recall that at our last meeting, we had approved the local action plan as drafted. And the next step for us as a board was to work with our detachment commander to, because that action plan is a 4-year plan, We then need to drill down on the specifics of the action plan and identify what are going to be the focus for 2026. Obviously, we're trying to accomplish as much as we can, but we can't accomplish everything in the first year. And it also gives the detachment commander some guidance on what the board sees as priorities, and also gives the board some idea on what the detachment commander sees as priorities and where she's going to apply the time and effort of the detachment staff. So again, as part of that meeting back in December, I met with Deb, went through with her the local action plan. And if you have it in front of you, I think it was sent as an attachment for to the minutes. You'll see at the very end, there's an overall, provides an overall review of the different categories, and then it goes into, so the action is called the action plan commitment summary, and then it goes into more detail on the specifics of that. So the first I'll speak to is the crime category. Under the second bullet there, you will see enhanced public safety through strategic offender apprehension, focusing on the arrest of individuals with outstanding warrants to ensure accountability, active involvement in the offender management and apprehension program, and supports consistent bail compliance monitoring, helping to prevent reoffending and uphold judicial conditions. What Deb would like to focus on this year is obviously getting her members to focus on that offender management side of things. We've heard a lot of that around the province about the, the arrest and bail provisions and the catch and release scenarios, but actually focusing on some proactive engagement where we're looking at those judicial conditions that people have on them and going after them as far as spending some time and some effort and some energy on ensuring compliance. So increased compliance checks and then collaboration with probation and parole. So what we're looking at for measurables, and something that these are the things that Deb will report on going forward each quarter, is the number of hours that we've spent on offender management, how many arrests have been made, and then hopefully our compliance rate. So if we know that we've got, for example, 10 offenders out on release, and when we do our compliance checks, we have 70% of them that are at home when they're supposed to be home and complying, then in that time period, we'll be able to speak to it. So Deb, I don't know if you want to speak to that one further.
The only thing that was on my list to speak about, but since we're talking about that action there, I'll just mention it. We did the OPP as an organization. Each detachment has gotten approval, and they've just been hired. It's OMAP actual officers. So each detachment area is going to have an officer specifically assigned to this program, who will then work with, as the chair mentioned there, the different stakeholders, probation, parole, the crowns, as well, just to go over all the wanted parties, and then in conjunction with our frontline. And just to be clear, that did not take from any of our frontline numbers. That's an additional position that we have now. So that's a great tool for us as well.
Thanks, Deb. And there still is what they call the ROPE unit, which is a repeat offender program.
Yeah.
They deal with the federal release candidates. They don't often go after the locally, provincially released ones. And as we know, you get what you inspect. So if we actually check on the individuals and make sure they're home when they're supposed to be home with curfew hours, make sure they're complying with their bail conditions, and hopefully the word gets out amongst the offenders in the community that we're going to be doing that, and that'll hopefully drive that compliance. So as we know, and it's not with all offenders, but some offenders, they just continue to reoffend. And if we can make sure that they're not reoffending, it keeps our community safe. The next item under crime was to strengthen local expertise in investigations, investigating crimes impacting our communities. The goal is to minimize violent crime, reduce victimization. And obviously what we're looking at is to increase the number of detachment members who have specialized training. As you will know, obviously with a frontline officer, it takes them about 4 years to become a first-class constable. And in those first 4 years, they're learning the ways of the road, doing traffic enforcement, learning how to engage with the community, how to take reports, but they're not necessarily skilled enough at that point or receive specialized training specific to criminal investigations, whether it's sexual assault investigations, domestic, partner abuse. It's very, very specific, and they need some of that training on how to manage that caseload. So the hope is that we'll be able to increase that training at the detachment level this year. And with that, we'll hopefully we'll see the reduction in victimization, because we'll be have a greater capacity to be able to investigate those crimes, which will therefore reduce victimization. And that's the goal. So what we intend to track is obviously the number of training hours conducted, the number of training sessions, and then the number of training hours, because some of it's not just in class, some of it's online that the officers can do, and then to also review our stats on victimization. So Deb, any comments on that one? Or and then the final category we're looking in the crime category is the last bullet: to enhance our response to the opioid crisis, remaining committed to reducing the harm caused by opiate production, trafficking, and use through enforcement, prevention, and community collaboration. And the specific items that we've talked about increasing this year is increasing proactive patrols in high-risk areas. So again, we know where the individuals are hanging out, they're dealing drugs, using drugs. Hopefully we can increase our proactive patrols in those areas, and also use the data that we have through our systems to be able to know where those individuals are frequenting and have a data-driven approach to do that enforcement. The second measurable action is to strengthen our partnerships with other specialized OPP units is the first one. Hopefully we'll improve whether that's a drug enforcement team, a street crime unit, but then also with other community supports to hopefully see a reduction in opiate-related harm throughout Haliburton County and a decrease in the overdose incidents. So the specific actions, we're obviously looking for more hours of proactive patrol in those key areas, the number of arrests that have been made for opiate or for any drug infraction, and then to sustain or increase the number of partners that we currently have to address the opioid crisis, and then to address the gaps in service that we may identify. And how we hope to do that is, again, it's not all about the police staffing numbers, but if we can support the county in obtaining additional mental health support staff, then they can then support those that are in crisis in advance of crisis or that are in addiction situations, which will then reduce the impact on police. So we will do what is needed to support other agencies getting additional staff so that they can do what they need to do. Member Hodgson?
Yeah, thank you. And I actually agree with that. Agree with it completely. The overdose numbers, do we have numbers on Haliburton County? Was that in there? It was in our other report?
It'll be like this year's anyways, will
Oh.
be in, yeah, the report for detachment board.
Again, any other questions? People feel free to jump in. Moving over then the
If I
next.
may,
Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
if I may, Mr.
Or sorry, Dave. No.
I'd just like to say wonderful. Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement of what you put together, and I'd certainly move the motion to accept and receive.
Thank you. Member Burton, and question by Member Carter.
Yeah, I think the report is great, and I think that virtually everything that is within the purview of the detachment is covered off here. But there are other areas such as fraud and cybercrime, and now with the use of AI, the luring of people into relationships, and we have serious numbers coming out now with teenagers who are getting lured into relationships and then having a high suicide rate. So these are things that certainly the detachment shouldn't be handling, but the OPP in general at some central level should be dealing with these. And I think that should also be covered in our reports. Like what is it that is being handled at the centrally that is helping our community? Because I think there's an awful lot there, and there's a number of other topics that could be added to that. So I think this is for the future, maybe, but again, not what our detachment does, but what should be done centrally by the OPP to protect our citizens.
Well, good comments, Member Carter. And I know that in the first bullet under commitments, it talks about use of crime analytics and community feedback to identify emerging trends. I think that goes along with what you're saying, is that we can look at what those provincial trends are and get those analytics from the province to say this is what they're focusing on from a bigger perspective. If it's fraud units, if it's central fraud crime or human trafficking teams that the OPP may have that are not being addressed by our local staff. It would be nice to know that they're on somebody's radar within the OPP.
Yes, anecdotally, I've heard of a number of cases of particularly elderly people who have been defrauded, in one way or another, and that's probably particularly in our area where we have more elderly people. That's going to become a bigger and bigger, um, challenge for everybody. And it would be nice if there was somebody centrally at the OPP who was working with that and reporting on their success or lack thereof.
Absolutely. And I think you'll see that that is partly covered in our community and well-being section, as well as in the crime section, is doing some of the prevention piece, because I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's easy to be victimized if you're not aware of some of the scams and seeing some of the scams and have them brought to your attention. So the elderly community is definitely a targeted community when it comes to frauds. Deb?
You guys keep stealing my thunder of some updates that I wanted to give you after. But Mayor, with respect to that comment, I'm going to add this in here right now as well. We, as you know, do quite a few preventative educational sessions, and actually have one coming up on January 27th for fraud and scams just like this, to target, or like to speak about the elderly scams. You're right, the dating scam is a big one. We've had a couple of those that I hadn't even heard of, and one was back in the summer, and one was right when I first got here. So we are having a lot of these education and presentations as well, just to kind of combat some of this stuff as well. But yes, we do have units provincially that target this as well. But I think, again, you just spoke about it demographically. We need to be mindful of our elderly population. So that's why we're trying to get out more. This one's at the Legion, just in case anybody's wondering, January 27th, and it's from 1 to 3. Or sorry, at 3 o'clock. Sorry, my bad.
Which Legion?
In the Minden one.
Okay.
Again, just not looking to take all the board's time today, but to take your guidance on going through the other two areas, the roadways and waterways and trails section and the community well-being section, just to bring those to your attention. So under our roadways, waterways, and trails, the first bullet point there, expand local level expertise and specialized traffic enforcement that would directly benefit our detachment. Obviously, what we're looking at is to get the specific training for some of the members, as we mentioned, the drug recognition, commercial motor vehicle training, so they can be designated as a commercial motor vehicle enforcement officer. Each of those categories, whether it's LiDAR, radar training, getting them the tools they need to be able to do the job so they can focus on the areas that we identified. So we're gonna measure the increased number of officers that are trained in each of those areas. We're gonna look at our collision rates to say, is our training allowing for then a reduction in collisions because we're doing more of the enforcement, and then gathering those enforcement stats that you've talked about, Andrew, just to keep tracking all the enforcement numbers and make sure our folks know what the priority are. And then speaking to that, the next one was to enhance proactive enforcement and visibility in the detachment area by continue to focus on the big four, which is, impaired aggressive driving, distracted driving, and seatbelt non-compliance, and to maintain a year-round focus on identifying and analyzing and addressing those causal factors contributing to collisions. So similar to the other category, we're going to measure the number of proactive patrol areas when they have the time to do some of that proactive work and run radar and do some of the commercial vehicle enforcement. Look at our, measure how many enforcement programs we actually participated in, what the stats were, what the compliance rate, if we're stopping, again, if we stop 10 trucks through our commercial motor vehicle enforcement day and 5 of them are non-compliant, and we know with a 50% compliance rate, and we're trying to change that to get a higher compliance rate. So again, lots of education campaigns to go with it. So that's the last piece of measurement, is how many education campaigns we run to educate the public on what they should and shouldn't be doing from a traffic, whether it's waterways, trails, commercial motor vehicles. And then the last area is bullet number 3, to increase public education and awareness of traffic safety, vehicle safety, and traffic related legislation through enhanced engagement presentations and data sharing. So Deb's, one of our focus for 2026 is to do more public education seminars and sessions and to do what we did in the fall session and actually bring specific officers that are trained in those areas to share with the community that attend what are some of the tools that are at their disposal, what are some of their tactics, how they do their work, and educate people on what they need to know and how they can improve their driving. So again, measuring the number of community engagement events and presentations, and then looking at the stats side of it to measure the compliance rate within the community. So if we're seeing a higher collision rate now versus when we do some training, if we're seeing more enforcement now and a less compliance rate versus later when we start doing the education, then we know that piece is working, or vice versa. And then finally, our last category is community well-being. Again, the first bullet point there is increase community engagement and strengthen community relationships through enhanced communication and information sharing. And in the outcomes, they're looking at, increase the number of community engagements and local level communication, increasing involvement at community events and festivals across the county, and then increasing engagement with the public via foot patrols. So some of the measurables specific to that area is to measure the number of events and festivals that we actually participate in, the number of foot patrol hours that we're currently tracking now, so not just their enforcement hours, and then looking at some sort of a feedback survey tool that we can use to identify the satisfaction within the community, because we know that was one of the things that was identified in our community survey before, was getting the officers into the community, doing some more foot patrol, doing that community engagement piece. Under bullet 2, strengthen relationship with local youth by providing structured and unstructured youth programming, delivering information about topics that impact youth, and prioritizing partnerships with the local youth focused organizations. Excuse me. So what we're going to focus on is obviously the hours that our officers are involved in those initiatives, the number of presentations they conduct, the number of partnerships, not just sustained ones, but any new ones, the number of events attended and supported. And then looking, as part of that survey that we did, the community survey, is looking at, is there a potential just to do a specific youth survey to see what their feedback is about the engagement with them? And, it's great that we're hearing from their parents, but can we actually engage with the youth and say, are we meeting their needs? What do they see as the satisfaction rate there? And then the final action is the second last bullet point, enhance partnership with local service providers to best support calls for service related to mental health, substance use and addictions, persons with disabilities, persons experiencing homelessness, and other factors that may contribute to increased victimization. And one of the areas we're looking at in this one to measure is, we asked Deb to focus on some clearly defined roles within the teams that we participate in. It's easy to turn to the police and say the police should be doing this, the police should be doing that, but as Sue knows, with our community safety and well-being strategies, it's not always about the police. So make sure people know what their roles and responsibilities are. Who do you call when you see a homeless person? Don't call the police. There's not a lot the police can do for that person at that point in time. So who are the points of contact, and ensuring that we have those clearly defined roles and responsibilities. We want to start measuring the statistics around victimization, to see, how many people are becoming victimized because of some of the opiate strategies, because of some of the homelessness, the addictions. And that's where some of those fraud scams, again, Mayor Carty, you talk about, people become victimized because they're, they don't have the capacity because they're under the influence, or they don't have the wherewithal to not be victimized. Looking at the number of partnerships, again, sustained or any new partnerships that we can undertake, and then a survey of some kind to get the feedback from those that we're serving. So not just specific to the public, but actually going to the targeted group that we're mentioning and saying, are we meeting their needs? Are we meeting the demands? Is that satisfactory? Whether it's from an enforcement or a support side, is how do we track that to say, are we meeting the needs of the community in that area? And then obviously the stats and our calls for service. And then the last piece, which might be a little bit hard to measure, but we're looking to track the services provided from a police and a non-police perspective. So that people, when we start sharing this at the end of the year, we can say, there was 100 calls for service, 10 of those were police related. 90 of them were actually other service partners that needed to support those people in those time of crisis. And so shifting that resource need and measuring, where does the demand from a non-police perspective go to a police perspective? And I know people will hate for me to hear me say this, but when they start looking to allocate those dollars provincially where they're needed. So to the people, to the mental health care, to the opiate crisis, homelessness crisis, as opposed to saying throw them at policing and we'll do more enforcement. That's not necessarily going to get to where we need to get to. So those are the key focuses that Deb and I have looked at so far. We bring them to the board today if you have any other feedback that you'd like us to focus on based on the plan. So Member Hodgson.
No, I appreciate that, and it's all good. I, again, come back to, I'd be looking forward to the data-driven allocation resources, and we've talked about that before at this table. Maybe this is more for Sue. I read in the paper, there's an opening for a job. I'm not applying, but there's a job for an organizer or central. Does that tie in with this? It's health and well-being.
Safety and well-being coordinator.
Yeah, so in very exciting news for me and the community, we are hiring a community safety and well-being coordinator. So that was the role that I was previously hired in July 2022. So when our plan first rolled out in 2022, council at that time had determined that there was a need for someone to ensure that the plan was not just sitting on a shelf, that we were looking at it, that we were moving it along, which, I can't say enough positive things about, not just because I'm in that role, but because I have seen in other communities where there hasn't been somebody who has been able to dedicate their time to their plan. I think a year and a half ago or so, I was promoted to this role now, which is the Director of Community Outreach. So a community safety and wellbeing plan coordinator will be within my department. I'll no longer be a department of one, although I've always said that it's never really been a department of one because of the amount of support within this building and in the community, working with partners as well. So yeah, absolutely. That coordinator, as well as myself, will work closely with Deb as we have, and especially through the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee, which meets approximately every other month, and which includes community members who represent different sectors such as education, health, hospital, public health, gender-based violence, community paramedics. So yeah, and we will be ensuring that we make really great connections between that committee and the work they're doing and this board and the work that we're doing here on hiring a coordinator. So we're hoping, I think, for next month yeah, we are currently in the hiring process.
Yeah, that's key, to have somebody actually focused on the work of the community safety and well-being plan and pulling it all together. So it's multiple jobs, multiple hats should be wearing in the past too. So Member Danielson?
I just wanted to say that one of the things that we were handed at our last county council meeting was the kind of a calendar of events under the community safety and well-being umbrella. And it's just extraordinary, the number of things that are being planned. And I would urge in any case where it's appropriate for the OPP to be involved. And I'm really happy to see that we're going to be hiring a coordinator to help with this, because Sue would never get a chance to be at home if she was the person who had to be involved in every one of the events. As I said, the more the OPP can be involved in some of those events where appropriate, the better. I will say that, having just come back from the Rural Ontario Municipal Association conference, that it just seemed in almost every workshop and every presentation that we heard or attended, there was a strong emphasis on homelessness and how that problem is increasing across the province, actually across the country. And that's going to be a real challenge for us to deal with going forward. And I'm not sure as a county councillor what we can do, particularly in a small community like Algonquin Highlands. But we are going to have to face that head on and do what we can to resolve that, or at least reduce the concerns that are being raised.
Excellent comments. Totally agree, Member Danielson. Thank you for that. Any other comments on any portion of the local action plan and the specific actions for 2026? And again, we're bringing this to the board now at our first meeting so we can start to track these things with Deb and work on these things throughout 2026. It doesn't mean the rest of the work is off the table or that none of the other categories are on the table. Deb will have to do that analytics as we go. And when we meet with her sort of on a quarterly basis as a board, if we see something we think needs some more attention, we can always bring that to her attention and seek her support. And she will continue obviously to update and change anything that needs to be changed in the year. But for now, these are the key focuses for us for 2026. I don't have any other questions. I think I've got a motion from Member Burton. Looking for a seconder to accept the.
I so second.
All right, Member Shevadukis. Oh, we'll pass it to Sue to read the motion.
Moved by Member Burton, seconded by Member Shevadukis, that the Central Region 1 Haliburton Highlands Action Plan 2026 to 2029 be approved.
All in favor?
All in favor.
Thank you
Yay.
very much. And appreciate your work on this, Deb. I know there's a lot going on behind the scenes and getting it up and running. So, and welcome, Member McKechnie.
Yeah, I'm really sorry here. Just you don't want to hear about it, but had a little problem here with my Wi-Fi, so I'm on my phone and I apologize.
The joys of technology.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Not the end of the world.
Next on our agenda, 7.3 annual billing statements. Just a couple of notes, and then I'll open it up for any conversations, discussions. This is one area, as you know, we've heard in the past that the board, although we don't have a lot of control over it, we do have an opportunity for input on it, and it's our opportunity as a board to try and drive some of the process. But in the fall, the annual billing statements went out to each of the municipalities, as the mayors on the board will know. These are 2026 estimates for costs. The total cost, as you will well have heard, has been capped at 11% for 2026 over the final amount that was billed in 2025. The statement includes both actual billing numbers and then the billable amount based on the cap. In the letter that was attached as part of the board package, you'll see there is a website, www.opp.ca/billing model, if you want more information on some of the components of it. And they did commit to hosting some webinars and some information sessions for CAOs and staff on some of the explanations. As you will see in the materials that were sent out, they do provide some explanation of the numbers, what constitutes municipal-based services and service costs versus calls for service. And just a couple of things that I want to note here. When I went through all the charts and all the numbers and compared municipality to municipality, the cost when you drill it down, the cost per property or per household for each of our for Algonquin Highlands is $239.05. For Dysart et al. Is $294. Minden Hills is $275, and then Highlands East is $305. When you compare that to the national average of cost per household, that's at $362. So we're well within those numbers. We may not be happy about them, but again, the cost of policing seems to be going up. And but then on the other side of the coin, when I looked at what the OPP is saying is the provincial-wide OPP average, the average for all OPP detachments is $203 for 2026, and we're above that for each of ours. So obviously something we need to manage going forward. And then, just looking at the numbers for 2016 compared to, we are still below what we were at 2016. But, as I've had a few conversations with some members, this is something that in 2027 was really going to bite us when some of the caps end and some of the funding supports end. So I from my perspective as a chair, I think we need to focus on pushing this a little bit further in 2026 to see how we can contain those costs, how we can ensure that, not necessarily, I'm not speaking from the OPP's perspective, their costs are their costs. The wage costs are the costs of benefits are what they are, the cost of the services, and they do it based on the needs of the community. But that funding model is becoming unsustainable for smaller municipalities, and we've got to, I think, go after some of these commitments were made by the government in previous years, to undertake a review of that, the funding model, take a review of the costing model and do these things, which we never seem to hear an end result on. So I'm looking for your comments and support that we as a board, whether it's writing letters, getting in front of provincial government and stressing the importance. I know the mayors were already doing it, AMO's doing it, Roma's doing it, others are doing it, but I think we need to rely on the OAPSB as a governance body to be our driver on this one and help us have a voice at the table. So, Member Hodgson?
Yeah, thank you. Well said, Chair. I think you're bang on the overall macro funding formula has to be changed for rural Ontario. Question specifically, I couldn't see in here when we're looking at. First of all, I think this comes back to us always thinking about what we can do and control is allocation resources and where we put our patrol people. Where's WSIB in here? I was trying to find Because is that I keep reading that that's an issue with policing is the amount of officers off that, and that's a huge cost to us. Or is that off explain that one to me if you could.
From what I understand, but I'd have to confirm with Lisa, who came and presented there when I first started here. But from what I understand, that's not included in the price at all. That's a separate thing, but I will confirm that for you.
Yeah, when I looked at the municipal cost piece, Member Hodgson, it says the costs allocated to municipalities are determined based on the costs assigned to detachment staff performing municipal policing activities. So that's those that are assigned. So we could have 50 people assigned here, but 5 of them are off on some disability or something, but we're still being billed for it. Yeah, I think we're just billed based on our staffing numbers, not actual bodies here in the detachment, but it's based on the authorized detachment numbers.
Double check that.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Member Carter?
Sorry, I support what you said. The thing about going forward, you know, the ominous words in all this is this statement that says the final reconciliation of your 2026 annual costs will appear in your 2028 annual billing statement. I mean, we were capped at 11% in Minden. I assume everybody else was. But the difference between what they would have charged us and the 11% was pretty significant. And so if this just keeps accumulating until we get to whatever 2028 or so on, it's a little bit like the sword of Damocles hanging over our head. You know, this is, I don't know exactly how we're going to be able to afford it. I mean, the OPP is, you know, certainly in Minden Hills is our largest single supplier and our largest cost. And I really don't know how we are going to sustain this.
Yeah, and maybe I read it a little bit differently, Member Carter. I think what that refers to is, for example, in 2026, our budget or the billing amount reflects a 2024 adjustment, right? So they're just catching up on that 2024. At the end of 2025, they catch up on that to say, okay, we underbilled you, so therefore we're now going to do an adjustment. So to your point, if in 2028 the costing model is higher, and they're now saying, well, in 2026 we undercharged you, and then that adjustment then occurs, then we're really going to get stung in 2027 and 2020 because it's going to be 2 years down the road. You're not going to see it this year. You're going to see it two years out from now.
Well, that's right. The thing that saved us a little bit this year was the 11% cap. And, you know, there are not many other items on our budget that had an 11% increase. You know, so the 11% cap was in. If as soon as that 11% cap is no longer supported, the only thing we've got going for us is that in 2028 we'll be coming close to an election again, and so the province may decide to, you know, to be nice to us. But I'm very, very worried about this and the whole funding. As you said, like when you talked about our numbers, you know, of 275 to 300, and then the provincial average is around 200. That means we're 50% higher.
If I can just put it in perspective for you, Member Carter, just to flip the coin a little bit, make you maybe feel a little bit better. When I looked at the numbers for some of the regional departments, including the one that I came from, they're upwards of 329, 342, 389 in Toronto, and 380 in a place like Sudbury. So we're still well below some of the municipal departments, but it again, not an explanation or an excuse. It's the costs just continue to rise, and it's being put back on the households. Yeah, right. That commercial assessment side. Right. Yeah, that's the key. Member Danielson.
Not to sound like a broken record, because I think I've brought this up several times already here, but one of the things that concerns me is that the billing is done on a per household basis. And, you know, so many, I mean, because we have such a huge seasonal population, I believe that we're being billed unfairly. And there has been a very strong case put forward, a lot of research done, a lot of presentations made a number of years ago with respect to this, that met no success at all. But that doesn't mean that we can't revisit that, because to me, I mean, that puts us in an entirely different situation, and I just don't believe that we're being billed fairly. You know, and that's the case in a lot of these rural communities or tourism-based communities.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what it comes down to, remember, Daniel, so when I did the breakdown, you start looking at base service, and then you look at the calls for service piece. And obviously our calls for service don't warrant the, during the off months versus the summer months, but, we're down at 0.07 and 0.35% of the total provincial calls for service in our community. So it's very low. So we don't get billed a whole bunch for that, but the base services are still quite high for those standard services right across the board. And you're saying, well, are we getting those services here in this community? And yet we're paying for them for that year round versus other communities that, as you say, are full-time residents 12 months of the year. So any other questions, comments? I think we may have lost member Burton, trying to get him back on the line. Any other comments? Again, it doesn't require a motion. Oh,
Yeah, I agree with Member Carter and Member Danielson about this. This has been a sore point with me for years, and I can remember the big increase back in 2014, 15, when the provincial government decided to, and I'm just giving you my version, they decided to raise Haliburton County's police budget from 2 million to 6 million. I believe throughout the province, they had the province had redirected funding formulas to areas at that time, and I'm just reiterating an old fact, to areas that could afford it. So Muskoka, Haliburton, they figured that we can afford it, so they raised our numbers and lowered numbers somewhere else just to make it better. I agree with the chair. You got to look at calls for service. That's what my past experience tells me as well. Calls for service, investigations, final lines. Now, hey, we all know, sir, we all know that certain services within the county are billed. Yes. And there's costs, wages are going up. Yes, I can see that. I would like to, if possible, and only as a suggestion, get the two officers that were giving us that report or that presentation about 6 months ago and see how all this comes into effect. And yeah, I too am worried that by 2018, there's going to be a big increase and there's not much you can do about it. So I'd like to get some more answers about it.
yeah, we actually have reached out, Member Chevadukas, to the Municipal Policing Bureau. They have a new name now, Deb. I can't remember what it is. But they've had some change in staff in there as well. And so the response we got back on some of our questions have been deferred, and they're trying to get somebody to answer those for us. So I will keep the board up to date, and maybe we can get them back in at either the next meeting or a subsequent meeting. But again, I'm not so sure that, that the OPP Municipal Policing Bureau is the approach for us. That's their costs are their costs, and that's what they're going to keep telling us. And I think even at the last presentation, they said, you need to go after that report that was supposed to be generated by the government to say we're doing a review of the policing model, and where did that land? Where did it go? So that's where I think, from my perspective, yeah, it'd be great to hear back from them as to some of these specific costs, the calls for service versus base, but I don't see them changing that unless the government says you will change it and that they will fund the base costs and just charge as the local costs.
Or unless we sit there and express our concerns and have them see that things are higher here than we expected them to be.
Yep, agreed.
Where I just don't believe that we should in the counties. You've got county councilors that have to be that are subjected to explaining the increases, so they should have the answers. And I'm all 100% for that. That someone's got to sit there and say, okay, fine, this has gone up, this has gone up, this has gone up. But you want to tell us why all of a sudden in 2 years it's gone up so much, and if it's wait a minute, we didn't assess enough. Well, I still like to keep their feet to the fire, if I may say.
Yeah, Member Carter, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, the thing about this is that this has to be the sort of an effort by everyone, and by all. I I spoke briefly to the Solicitor General on this past week, and gave him a shot about that item. And I think that we, in delegations at Roma and AMO and at using those associations, we've got to be, talking about these numbers. And I think coming up through ourselves here at the detachment boards, we have to be talking about it also. It only once it gets to a certain noise level is the government going to realize that they have an issue.
Yep, I couldn't
Yep.
agree more.
I agree.
Member McKechnie, I think you had your hand up. You're still on mute, Walt.
Thank
There
you. Now, needless to say, these costs are, going up like everybody's saying, and it's just crazy. And to me, it's just a prime example of, like you're talking about what are we going to do about it? All the other councillors are, and all the other members are, and it's just a prime example to me of how we really got to get our house in order in regard to what our priorities are. Because unless the province steps in here and start helping out with a lot, our priorities, right now we're dealing with the OPP. To me, the probably the number one priority is our healthcare, and then then you have the OPP. We need our safety and all that, but in our roads. I mean, we have so many other things that we spend money on that I don't know. Like, are we going to be able to continue to keep supporting so many of these services that we support now? It's pretty scary, I think. There's only one person who pays. That's the taxpayer. And this is like you say, and Councillor Carter was saying, and Andy was saying, these are big costs that are going down to only the one payer, and it scares me. I'm a big person about priorities, and needless to say, the OPP is a priority. I'm not saying that. Thanks for your time.
Yep. Thanks for your comments, Walt. All right. Again, I don't think this item requires a vote or a motion. It's just for information and for some discussion. And again, happy to take the direction of the board, as we've heard today, to lobby government, to push government, to try and bring our voice to the Solicitor General and anybody else that'll listen to us, to say something's got to change here, and we've got to find a way to manage this better, so that the impact is not going to hit us when this 11% cap's no longer in place. Moving on to 7.4, decisions and findings report from the Inspector General of Policing. Again, it was attached, the media release that was sent out was attached as part of our package, and it was just, again, to bring this to the board's information and attention. As you will read, and as you've probably seen, now the inspectorate, and this is again one of the requirements of the new act and a push for some more transparency, the findings of each investigation or inspection that is done by the inspectorate are now documented, and they get publicized to this site. What happens from those decisions, just for some clarity, is the Inspector General then determines, based on the inspection, whether or not the provincial laws and standards have been complied with, and whether they be met, and then they issue a binding decision. So if they're not satisfied that, say, for example, the board hasn't done something, they can issue a binding decision directing us to do certain things. And if you had a chance, there's a number of decisions that are on that site. Some of them are complaints about the actions of officers. Some of them are complaints about actions of board members. Some are complaints about the service delivery model for the policing. So, I encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to do so, go and look at the website, look at some of the decisions, and it makes you sort of become more alive to the compliance that we're going to be held to account to as a board. And that everything's transparent now. So if there's a complaint filed, it's going to hit that report at the end of the day. Any comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move into section 8 of the agenda, unless anybody needs a quick bio break or anything. We'll continue on. All right, so item 8.1, the chair's update. Just a couple of things to bring to your attention that since our last meeting, we got a note from both the OAPSB and the OACP around the province-wide police recruitment campaign. It was referred to as Answer the Call. So they've really been pushing recruitment in policing. What we've learned is that campaign exceeded expectations. There was nearly 27,000 qualified leads that were generated from that campaign that they were able to track. What they did when they tracked it was that the candidates weren't just clicking on ads to see what it was about, but they were actually spending meaningful time reviewing information about careers in policing. And as a result of that, they've extended the campaign to the end of June 2026. And they're confident in saying that the interest in policing is strong across Ontario and is increasing, which is good news for those of us in the policing sector. To know that people are starting to show an interest in policing again, which we haven't seen in probably the last 5 to 10 years. So that recruitment campaign has really paid off. The next one is just, and again, Sue brought this to our attention, and I'd seen it through the OACP group as well, around mental health crisis response training. And again, this speaks to our billing and some of the expenses and some of the time commitments that we talk about with our staff. But as a result of the legislation changes in 2025, in the fall of 2025, the province has now mandated mental health crisis response training for all police services across the province of Ontario for every police member. And this training involves, there's an online module, and then there's also scenario-based training, which can be done in person or by virtual reality. So they wear these virtual reality goggles and they're presented with a scenario, and then their actions are tracked and so on and so forth. It was supported by a number of universities that were, Laurier, I think, was one of them. I can't remember the other one. And the real focus is around de-escalation tools and giving officers understanding about how to deal with certain groups within the community. If they see certain things happening, what are the triggers? What should they look at? How to de-escalate based on what that person might be thinking. So we did reach out to Deb to try and get a handle on what that would mean to the OPP and to us as a detachment. And what we learned is that the OPP is still working on it. It's a huge mandate. They're trying to figure out how to deliver on that and what sort of timing they're going to give us to deliver on it. It might be fine for a municipal police service of 50 people that, yeah, you can deliver it in 1 year, but you're not going to deliver it to the capacity of the OPP within 1 year, I wouldn't think. So, but again, very valuable training, very worthwhile training, but something, that I think is going to take a bit of time, unless you have other comments on that one, Deb.
No, that was exactly the messaging I got there. Still working it out because it's a big undertaking for sure.
And then the last update, just to give you some update and insights on the OAPSB and some of the work that they've been doing in behind the scenes. And I'll ask Sue to jump in a minute because she's been attending some webinars as well and some meetings. We are getting from the OAPSC these things called governance insights, and they are a number of short articles highlighting core governance questions that are being raised around the province. And then they're providing us some support documents to go along with it. So for example, this year in this session, there was one on annual board activity cycle specific to OPP boards. So they've got a template now to follow on, adopt annually certain things. When do you track progress on certain things, cross-referencing resources. And they put a nice spreadsheet together that Sue and I will now be able to look at and say, okay, these are the things that they're encouraging provincially, but at least they're giving us something to work with. Included in that package was things about chief and deputy salary analysis, which doesn't really affect us here in this jurisdiction. Municipal chief performance management guides, which again didn't really impact us. And then there was what they referred to as an administrator handbook, which again, I think, Sue, that was the drive of the session that you participated in. Thankfully, I think what they're hearing and what they're seeing is across particularly all boards across the provinces with the new legislation, the administrative and support staff for boards is finding it quite daunting as to some of the work that they now have to undertake. So some useful information, some useful support, and we'll continue to get those quarterly, and we'll participate in some of the training sessions as often as we can. So Sue, I don't know if you want to speak to the most recent one that you participated in.
Yes, so I attended yesterday, I believe, the OAPSB admin session. It is monthly and it is optional. I don't think they've held one for a while, but I do try to attend when I can. They did highlight again the Haliburton Highlands OPP Detachment Board webpage that we have set up for this detachment board as a good example for other folks looking at creating something similar for their detachment boards. However, I took away even from this meeting some more that we can add. We can add the policies that we've worked on already and make note that we are continuing to develop policies for compliance. They did note that boards are all at very different stages of readiness. It is really helpful, as Andrew noted, to have those guides so that we can ensure that we've sort of set up this board for success and continue to do so. I think they also have an OAPSB meeting. It's virtual for board members. So I can send out that information to you. I think I have in the past, but just to get it on top of your inbox, if you're ever interested in attending, it's really, there's a bit of a presentation and then a casual Q&A discussion. And happy to hear any feedback that you have from those meetings in case there's anything else that we might do at our board. I think that's it.
And then just to put it on the radar, I was going to wait until the notice of upcoming business section, but the OAPSB is partnering with the OACP and the associations from across the province on what there used to be called a labor conference, is now a police employment conference. That is coming up February 24th to 25th in Toronto. They present on grievance decisions, arbitrations, collective bargaining, human rights cases. So if any board member has a keen interest in joining in that conference, please let us know and we'll see about getting you registered. It's the 24th and 25th. And then I think I mentioned this the last meeting, the annual conference this year for OAPSB is partnering with the OACP, and that'll be held May 31st to June 3rd down in Niagara Falls. So we'll look at see what the agenda looks like for this year and determine if there's some value in the board attending, or at least a member of the board attending. Unless you have any questions, I will turn it over to Deb for 8.2 for the detachment commander update, and for Alicia to try and pull up on the screen the presentation piece.
Okay, so the first area there, we're talking about collisions. So from October to December is this reporting period. I'm going to also speak to the year in totality as well, though. But so for collisions for this reporting period, there was one fatal motor vehicle collision from October to December, which is down 50% from this time last year. There has been an increase of non-fatal injuries from 7 to 15, but property damage is down from 136 to 108. So overall in collisions, we're down 14.5% compared to this time last year. And then year to date, we're also down 18.4% in all categories. So that's good to see. And again, you know, that's just one of those measurables that we can talk about for the action plan and stuff if with the officers out there doing their enforcement. When you go to the next page there for the collisions, it just kind of breaks it down again. And so basically there's one fatality in this reporting period, which is the same as this time last year. It involved a motorcycle, and the rider and passenger were both unfortunately killed during that incident. There was no alcohol or drugs involved in that. When you go down to the criminal code and provincial statutes laid, criminal code non-traffic offenses are up to 153, which is 28.6% increase in this reporting period. Criminal code traffic are up 100% to 26. Highway traffic is down to 265, which is an 18.7% reduction. Liquor License Act is down. Other violations are also down. So overall, though, we're down 5.2. But for the entire year, we're up 3.9 for a total of 2,996 offenses in total for the entire year. For traffic-related charges, there's a decrease of 50% of speeding charges year to date, an increase of 12.5% of seatbelts, a decrease of impaired charges from 9 to 7, so 22.2% reduction. And distracted driving charges are also down 58%. Year to date, we are up significantly in all areas except for the speeding category. So again, year to date, and when you talk about October to December, you know, again, some of that can be contributed to weather. It's so far winter has come out with a bang and doesn't seem to want to leave. So there could be some of that contributing to that as well. But overall, it's good to see our stats are up. When you go down to the next section of e-ticketing, Again, warnings are down to 122, which is a 23.3 decrease. But again, as I've mentioned in previous meetings, this shows discretion by our members. They're still getting out there and educating motorists roadside. We're also, as the chair mentioned, we did that education piece, which we want to do again as well this year a few times. So they are still enforcing, as our stats are up there, and still getting out for the e-ticketing and education. Again, just a reminder, our big four priorities, so speeding or aggressive driving, distracted driving, seatbelts, and impaired driving, just to recap that. When you go down to violent crimes, there is an increase from 3 to 8 in sexual offenses for this reporting period. Assaults and firearm-related offenses are up, and most of those are, they're up, sorry, 30.8%. Most of those are IPV related. So again, you're still seeing that it's been a year now since we implemented those positions, that we brought them back within the OPP to have a review of our IPV related. So again, you're seeing that oversight. So that's good to see that we have some extra eyes who are completely trained in that category. Other offenses involving violence or threats are down 53.3% to 7. Overall, there's a difference of 1 violent crime for this reporting period for an increase of 3.2%. Year to date, we are up 31.8 in violent crimes, which again is largely contributed to the IPV violence. Property crime, when you move down to the next page, B&Es are up 40% to 7 in total for this reporting period. Theft over and under has not changed. Possession, trafficking, stolen goods has also not changed. Frauds are down 26.3%. Mischiefs remain unchanged. Overall, in this category, we're down 4.5% year to date, from 340 incidents to 311. So that's, again, really good to see those numbers coming down.
Just for the benefit of the board members, IPV is intimate partner violence.
Sorry, thank you. I appreciate that. When we go to drug crime, there are 2 possession and 2 trafficking charges again from October to December, which is the same from this time last year. Overall, we're down 20% in the drug category. So down 33.3% overall for the year, again, which is good to see. The top 5 violations, just again from October to December, are theft under, assaults, firearm-related offenses. So again, those intimate partner violence ones, fraud, and failure to comply and mischief. So failing to comply with their probation orders and release orders. When you go down to the next page, the other crime occurrences. Overall, we are up 16.2% in all categories. There is an increase in provincial statutes and driving offenses, and other violations remains the same as this time last year. Year to date, we are down slightly by 9.9% in this category. The clearance rate category, there's an increase of 0.6% for violent crimes, a decrease of 37.2% for property crimes, but an increase of 16.7% in other crimes. The decrease for property crimes, again, I think I mentioned this at the last board meeting because we were having some issues with some break and enters out in Highlands East. The decrease can be due to the active and ongoing investigations, because at times it takes our officers, and then in conjunction with specialty units, it takes them a bit of time to review that surveillance video, to do all that canvassing of neighbors, all that kind of stuff, to come together and be able to say, yes, it's the same person, or no, it's not, and to link all that stuff down. So they're more complex cases. So sometimes that's what that fluctuation can be. There is a decrease of 25% for drugs. Provincial statutes are up 2.1%, but driving offenses are down 20%. Clearance rates do fluctuate, and it's certainly something we expect. And if I were to run the numbers now, even especially for that property crime one that I mentioned, it could be way different just because it's been a bit of time now and the officers have had time to look at it. Unfounded, we are down by 4.2% to 23. So these are these calls where there was a criminal act alleged, and then through the investigation of the officers, they've determined that it's unfounded. It's not actually the crime. When you go down to public complaints, there are 2 public complaints during this reporting period related to conduct. And year to date, there is an increase of 9 from 5.3. As you know, there was the incident in April that involves SIU coming in. So 3 of those 9 were directly related to that, and those officers have since been cleared. The DAR, the daily activity reporting. So this is just going to capture again, and this information here is just to kind of give a caveat here. It's as good as the officers are putting into their DAR reports each year, and there's been a lot of training, a big push on this data integrity in general for the OPP, to really remind officers of scoring their time appropriately. So DAR does show that there's been 1,452.25 hours of cruiser patrol, 6.5 aircraft hours, 3.25 marine hours, which that one I can say is definitely more. So that's, I can certainly as a commander say that needed scored better. 42.25 snowmobile hours to date, 71 foot patrol hours, and then 1.75 school patrol hours. Again, those 2 categories, I can tell you that they're higher than that. But again, it's just what we're putting into these systems. Overall, we are down slightly in our patrol hours. Our community engagement and school patrols continue to be that focus, as I mentioned to you when I first came in here, as time permits for our officers to get out there. When it comes to youth charges and by disposition, there was 1 diversion for use during this reporting period. Overall, in dealing with use, we are down this reporting period. Year to date, there is an increase of 7, and 5 of those were charges. When you talk about mental health, so Mental Health Act calls for service are down for this reporting period. Mental health specific calls, there were 24. There were 15 threats of suicide, and then there were 52 other calls that MCERT was involved with and made referrals. So again, I think we chatted, I don't know what board meeting, but about the importance of our MCERT worker and our nurse getting out there to calls, and they do that. And sometimes when they're at, something that doesn't come in as flagged for mental health related, something like a neighbor dispute or something, it turns out that in conversation and the good communication that my officer and nurse have in the community, that something will come out of that and they're able to get them supports and make referrals. So that's always a great thing as well. Year to date, just to capture mental health for you, there's been 225 mental health specific related calls. However, again, just on what I basically just said to you there, MCERT alone has been involved with 410 incidents where they have provided support. So almost double. Of the initial 225 calls, 179 are follow-up, and about 60 of them were live calls. Of those live calls, 15 individuals were apprehended and taken to the hospital, and others that went to the hospital went on their own accord. Overdoses, just in relation to the question earlier as well, there was 0 overdoses for this reporting period. Year to date, we are also down in overdoses from 3 to 2. So year to date, we've had 2. And then when you come down to referrals to victim services, so they're continuing to occur. They are down slightly from this time last year, from 117 to 113, but the acceptance rate is up by 55%. Year to date, we are up from 517 to 575 referrals, and the acceptance rate is up 40%. Victim services actually has been into our office. I mean, they come in quite regularly, but specifically they came in at shift briefings for each of the 4 shifts and did a presentation about the importance of that, and just kind of explained to the members that it doesn't have to be, for those sudden death type calls. It can be for any type of call, and that they're there to help. So the collaborative relationship that we have with victim services has been phenomenal, has really proven that as well. And then not on the report is the next thing there is the PowerPoint. So again, just to kind of show you the, excellent work that the officers are doing. Do you have the PowerPoint there, Alicia? Okay. So some of the things that I just wanted to highlight that our officers have been doing. So the first one there, the first slide was actually myself and my media officer. We went and we did my very first live radio chat with Canoe FM, talking about Festive Ride and other traffic enforcement. It was really great, and it was great to be invited. So we'll definitely partake in that again. The next picture there that you see is our auxiliary members out for the Fill a Cruiser event in all the municipalities there. So that was good. The third picture there is South Lake Pajama Project. They came in and gave us some pajamas for us to use for people that may be in need when we're dealing with members of the public. And they do that with a lot of our other partners within the community, a great organization. The next slide shows one of our community street crime units, drug investigation. So that was in Minden, and it led to possession of Schedule I substances for the purpose of trafficking, 2 counts, and then possessions of proceeds for property obtained by crime. So some really good work that was just done there on January the 8th. The next one speaks about break and enters in Haliburton. So again, this is kind of similar to the one that's in Highlands East. I mean, different individuals involved, but this could have been why some numbers again were the way they were, just because it did take us a bit of time to get this individual and to kind of link all the crimes together. But so some good work there from the members as well. The next one talks about drug seized just from a simple traffic stop. So again, just really, you know, this one just highlights, and this is the one I use when I talk to my members about the importance of just, again, being out in the community and stopping traffic. You think maybe you're pulling them over for, you know, an educational purpose when it comes to the Big Four or something, but then it can lead to something else that's being brought into our community, as you mentioned there earlier. Serious collision that was on Highway 35. So again, just to show you that, you know, there are still times where we're calling in our traffic units to come in, our specialty units for that kind of stuff, and having to shut down roads. But as I mentioned earlier, the MVCs overall are down, which is great to see. The next slide speaks about our festive ride, which we got out and completed a whole bunch of ride programs. I'm sure you would have seen the members out. So that's great to see and highlight, which is obviously that's a provincial-wide thing. Not only did we, you know, do it on the roadways, we spoke about, I know in drafting the action plan, we talked about railways and our trail system, and basically, you know, the lack of training for my members, which I've secured more seats, but again, you know, being creative, we can be at the trailheads and do those ride checkpoints right there. So again, the officers out at the trail checkpoints for MSVs, snowmobiles. So that's great to see that capture as well. And then just traffic stats in general. This one I love just because, again, it just speaks to our community in general, which is great. So if you read that, it says in 2025, over 1,800 traffic stops were conducted in Haliburton County alone, and it resulted in more than 2,000 traffic-related charges. So that's really great to see too. And then just some of the other stuff, which you'll see typically, but it's just seeing some of those roadways that are closed, again, for collisions. And then we'll obviously update you with when they're reopened and everything. That's all I had sent you, but some good highlights that I just kind of wanted to bring to your attention that I had been working on and have the approval, and I'm able to mention this stuff to you, is I put in a decision note that back in the fall, and just finally got this approval, but pretty pumped about it. We're the first one, and if it goes well, it could be something that'll be done continuously or even provincially. But we have a grade 9 student who will be coming into our office once a week to clean the exterior of our police cars. Mostly though, the takeaway from this is to have that youth engagement with our officers, for this youth to be able to come and interact and have those good experiences with our officers. So this youth was due to come in last week. Unfortunately, there's obviously, as you can imagine, there are some risk and liability associated with that. So one of the caveats is if we have a prisoner, just because that's the cell area is near our washing bay, then he's no longer able to come in. So he has not had his first opportunity to come in yet, but we're pretty excited to do that. We're just working on a media release for that. Media's been pretty busy with the weather events as of late, so that's is to come. The other exciting news that I did share with the chair and with Sue is that we just got approval. Again, I put forward for an opportunity to have a summer employment student. So Haliburton County was accepted. So that's really great news for us. The application is up. And again, I will share that with Sue so that she can share it with the county the moment that I get that media release. I'm hoping it's by the end of today, but I'll follow up with that. So that'll be great. Hopefully we get a bunch of applicants for that. I'm not sure what the appetite will be like for our area. We'll see. Fingers crossed, because I think that'll be fabulous for them to come out and probably pair up with Joel for some of those events and stuff throughout the summer. And then lastly, the one I just am working on right now, as I mentioned, youth's a big thing for me too, and I ran it back where I came from, is a youth academy. So the idea of that is it'll be a 6-week program. So the youth will have to, I did it back where I came from age grade 10 to 12. I just found that that was a good age group for wanting to get into policing, because it's kind of that recruitment piece as well. So they would have to submit an application essentially. And then we would do our checks and screen. And then ideally we'd have a group of 10 to 15 youth. And it'd be likely we'll do it on Wednesdays from like 5 till 6:30 at night, 7 at night, for 6 weeks. So again, that one's we're just starting to roll out with that one and get that out on social media too. So lots of great things coming up for community involvement and engagement. Pretty excited about all of it. And that's all I got.
Thanks, Deb. And again, we are waiting for the formal provincial announcement, but we understand we might be a strong candidate for our ride grant application as well this year. So we'll wait to hear for the announcement on that one, which again will aid in our funding to be able to do some of the ride stuff that Deb applied for. Any questions, comments from the board members on either the chair's report or the commander's report? Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great report and great initiatives. Really appreciated. Like the youth engagement is, as Member McKechnie's mentioned often, that's a very big part of our community. So thank you for that. On the stats part with the drug offenses, 2 drug offenses, when we've had some pretty significant charges, like for instance in the res in the main street of Haliburton. How does that get captured? Is that provincial numbers? You don't get credit for that?
No, we do. Oh, sorry.
Because I just saw two for the year, and that, like, I can name off more than that just on top of my head that I know of, that just from the papers. I thought. Perhaps I'm misunderstood.
I'm just going back up to my stats here. Sorry too. I'm just so. Yeah, no, we do get credit. I'll have to look in that one again. I thought it was just going to speak to fatalities and stuff, but no. Year to date, sorry, if you go down, so the 2 were for this reporting period. Year to date, you're right, there has been more. There's been 8 for possession, 4 for trafficking, so for a total of 12. So that's why. So I'm sorry if I misspoke, or I misspoke. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
And if I can as well, I know that Deb, you referred to, I think it's on page 42 of the report, but the clearance rate, I often get focused on the wrong column on that one. And when I do look back and see that, for violent crimes, for example, for the year, we're at almost 82% clearance rate, which is a good news story. That's higher than the provincial average for violent crimes. Our property crimes at 17.4 is a little bit lower than probably we'd like to see it. But again, some of those, as Deb's mentioned, roll over into the new year. The investigation hasn't been closed yet, so therefore they can't stat it. But all of our other ones, the other category, drugs at 83.3% clearance rate. That's a pretty good clearance rate, and 100% for federal stats. So, I think you have to look at the bigger picture and not just look at the increase year over year, but say, where are we standing this year, and are we meeting those metrics that we expect of our people to be above 75% in clearances? They're actually clearing the calls that are, yeah, particularly for, I think, for violent crimes, you're always striving to as close to 100 as you can for violent crimes, but anything over 75 for those. Property crimes a little bit harder. They usually fall in around the 30% category, but I think we're doing pretty well as a detachment in that category. So, other comments, questions? If not, I'll look for a motion to receive.
I get a motion to receive.
Member Shevadukis, second by Member Danielson. Sue, over to you.
Moved by Member Shevadukis, seconded by Member Danielson, that the reports under Section 8, Chair Update and Detachment Commander Update be received for information.
All in favor?
In favor.
So approved. Thank you very much. And the last section of our agenda, communication and correspondence, you will receive the items that were attached in the agenda, the letter from Minister Solicitor General Kersner. That was his pre-Christmas message. So again, fair bit included in there, but we'll the piece that I would like to focus on is some of the grant program pieces, and that's what helps us do the stuff we need to do. But as Deb knows, those are like the Safer and Vital Communities grants, those are big applications and they're multiple years, so they're kind of hard to get your teeth into, but hopefully we'll have a chance at some of those. And then legislative and regulatory changes, and of course the OAPSB quarterly newsletter that I referred to in my chair update. So those are just items for information. However, I believe we need a motion to accept them. The motion, Member Carter,
I'll second it.
seconded by Member Shevadukis. All in favor to receive communication and correspondence?
In
Thank
favor.
you. Next up is items, notice of upcoming business. I don't think we have any, Sue, that I'm aware of, Alicia. So the date, item 11, date of our next meeting is Wednesday, March 25th, 1 p.m. here at the county building as usual. So that's an additional meeting, I think, that we added in for next year's category or next year's meeting schedule. So every couple of months. And unless there's anything else that I see from the members, I'll ask for a motion of adjournment at 2:34. Member Carter, seconded by Member Hodgson.
Moved by Member Carter, seconded by Member Hodgson. Be it resolved that the January 21st, 2026 meeting of the Haliburton Highlands Ontario Provincial Police Detachment Board now adjourn at 2:34 p.m.
All in favor?
Intro.
Safe travels
Yes.
for those that are here, and stay warm and dry for those that are home.